well, I think we can go ahead and get started. I've got a lot planned for us today. I want to start out by saying welcome to the special classes. And my name is Kaye Judt, and I come to you from East Central Indiana. We're northeast a little bit of Indianapolis. And one thing I want to tell you about myself, I love puns. And so I was teaching at a seminar whose theme was Jingle Bells. And Marie Letary from Michigan taught this wonderful pattern of a tatted bell in the morning. And then I came up to teach in the afternoon, and I told my students, I am so sorry. I thought the theme was Jingle Bells, so I came up with a Jingle Bell, and she does jingle. So I'm going to switch over to the close-up camera and introduce you to my family of tatted people. And see if I can remember how to do this. There we go. So this is Belle, and this was close to Christmas time, so she's carrying a Christmas package, and inside her skirt, we've got a jingle bell, and she has a little wooden bead for her head. No face. I've got this thing about faces, so that was my first person. The next time I taught a person was for Finger Lakes, and the theme must have been hearts, because this is Belle d'Amour. Notice she's carrying a little heart, and I actually wanted bows down here in her skirt. Her skirt is tatted as well, but they ended up looking like hearts. So again, if you want to, I'll get you up here a little closer. She does have little ringlets to her hair. And again, she's all tatted. And then I taught at Florida for Ruth Perry's tatting days. And again, it was hearts again. And so I came up with a couple called Sweethearts. And so this little girl, you can see she's got two colors, so she's got a little off-the-shoulder dress with a pretty little bit of picot technique around the sleeve. And I was thinking, and she also has hair, and I put a little bun in her hair. So as I'm tatting this, I'm thinking, well, darn, I wish I had a little bitty silk flower. And then I thought, well, you goofy girl, just go ahead and tat her one. So I tatted her a flower to put in her hands, because basically she doesn't have hands. I just take her arms and kind of fold them in half and stick something in her hands at the time. Well, she had to have a sweetheart. So here's the gent. And again, he's got dark brown hair. He's got a mustache and beard and sideburns. He's wearing a jacket with lapels. Oh, I've got to have my head examined. With lapels. And he has separate shoes too. He was a lot of work. And I ended up gluing him to a washer so he would stand up. I covered the washer with some tatting thread. And so here's the gent and the lady. And then we have Belle d'Amour and Jingle Bell. Yes, I'm working on a book, but I do want some more hair variations and clothes variations. So that's why you haven't seen it yet. And so when I had to come up with a project for today, I decided we would do a very mini Belle. I mean, here's how she compares to the other people. And that way we can get her pretty much finished, with the exception of the bonnet. I can get you pretty far along on the bonnet and talk you through the finishing. I'll also talk about construction too, but we're going to start on the body. And the body is tatted. I don't know if you can see that. It's not focusing well. But the body is tatted. Very similar to block tatting, although we're doing chains and they go round and round in a spiral. So the bead for the head on this little bitty one is about a 1/2 inch diameter. And then the larger ones are 3/4 of an inch. So if you're working in size 10, which this is a body tatted in size 10, it's coming out a little bit bigger. And so you'll need the 3/4 inch bead for the head on the size 10 thread. And again, with the itty bitty Belle, she's got an itty bitty flower tucked into her hands. And I used variegated multicolored thread for that. And I'll talk a little bit about tatting with multicolored threads too. So I'm going to get you started. I will start the shuttle tatters first, and then needle tatters. I will get you started in a few moments. So first thing you need to do is load your beads on your thread. And then they're going to stay on the ball thread. And then you're going to wind 1 yard or 1 meter of thread on your shuttle. And usually when I'm measuring 1 yard or 1 meter, I start at my shoulder. And let me switch cameras so I can show you. I start at my shoulder here and measure out to the end of my hand, clear over here. That's 1 yard. This is not 1 yard, that's way too much. But from my shoulder to the end of my hand is 1 yard. And if you need a 1/2 yard, I measure from up here in my hand to my elbow, and that's about a 1/2 yard. So let me switch back to the camera. And then we can get started for shuttle tatters. And I put a paper clip on here, mainly because we're going to start with a chain. We're going to be doing all chains for the body. And so I put that in my pinch. And I run the shuttle thread over my fingers. And then I'll start in with the double stitch. And what this paper clip is doing, number one, it's giving me something to hang on to, but it's also leaving a space at the very beginning because we're going to tat a length of chain and come back around and join into that space. So leave that paper clip in there until the pattern says to take it out. And the pattern is 6 double stitches. I'm getting a little glare here. Let me turn this down. Is that a little bit better? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're going to leave a very small picot space because we're going to be joining into those. And as I'm tightening up my double stitches on my chain, I don't want to over tighten them. I want them fairly straight, but, and I suppose I could have done balanced double stitches to keep them straight, but that was just way too much to include them in this class. So I just kind of watch my tension as I'm working on these little people here. And you can tell that that's about all the space I leave for that very small picot. Just enough to get my crochet hook in there. And I don't need those beads just yet. And we're going to have 4 sections of 6 double stitches before we need to join back in. Now, shuttle tatters, get this far tatted, and then don't do anything until I come back to you. I want to get 1, 2, 3, 4. That's perfect. So I'm going to get my needle tatters going. Okay, and again, I put my 3 beads on my ball of thread and leave them there until I need them. And I'll also have a paper clip in here to keep from, it's going to stop me when I'm pulling my thread through the double stitches. And I'm going to put about 1 yard in my grip. And the loops off to the side with the paper clip. And then I'll start in doing a chain of 6 double stitch. And again, we'll leave very small picots because those are for joins. Two, 3. 4. 5. 6. And I need 1 more section of 6 double stitches. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And then needle tatters. I do have 3 very little picots, which is what I want, and 4 sections of 6 double stitches. Get this far and then stop, and I'll come back to you. Let me go back to the shuttle tatters at this point. Okay, shuttle tatters. What we are going to do now is take out the paper clip and then lock join into that space that the paper clip left. And what I want to do, because I'm going to be joining into the front side of my double stitches, I want to do a down lock stitch. And I used to think, well, I have been tatting since 1992, and I've been doing up join for my lock stitches since that time. And as I decided to give them a try and go with a down join this time, and by George, it really does look much better. So what I'm going to do is use a bit of my shuttle thread. I'm going to reach up through the picot and pull a loop of my shuttle thread through that hole that was left by the paper clip. I'm pulling it down through that hole, and I do not want to I do not want this loop of thread to twist. So I pulled it down through the hole, and then the shuttle goes down through that loop of thread. Now, one thing I do with my lock joins, I always pull on this loop of thread to make sure that I have my chain where I want it to end up. And I stick my finger on that and then pull on the shuttle thread. If you must, these will come out, but they're not fun to take out. And so now we're going to start building up. And we're going to do a chain of 6 double stitches. And I don't want these over tightened, but I do want them snug together. And here where the first joining picot is, I'm going to do a down lock join. So I reach up from underneath, from the back side of the picot, pick up that shuttle thread, and pull it down through the picot. And then put the shuttle down through the loop of thread. Pull on that loop of thread so that I've got my preceding chain just right where I want it. Stick my thumb on there to hold it, and then pull on the chain. Or pull on the shuttle thread. And that will lock that join right in place. Now this is not a Catherine wheel. We want it more of a tube. And so once I come back around and join back here into the first lock join, then it'll start taking on a tube shape, and it'll look much better even once you get the third trip around. Let me take you a little bit farther, and then I'll go back to the needle tatters. Because we've just joined into her right side. Again, I'll snug up my chain, but not too much. And we will do a down lock join at her front. pull on the loop, put my thumb on, and then tighten down. Now I'm going to want to use one of these beads. These are for buttons on her shirt. And so normally, if we do tatting with a bead, let me bring that up there, we do a whole double stitch and then put the bead on the picot. But if we put the bead on the picot, that's going to be hidden inside the body. So what I'm going to do is have you put the bead in the middle of the stitch so that it'll be on the outside of the body. It'll be riding on the waistband of the stitch rather than on the picot or the inside waistband. So I will do the first half of the stitch. I will bring up my bead, and then I'll do the second half of the stitch. And I want to make sure there's enough thread to go from the first half of the stitch through the bead and then make the second half of the stitch lie right next to the first half of the stitch. And that's true whether you're doing regular bead tatting or something out of the ordinary like this. And then I will do 5 more double stitches. Snare up a little bit. And then do a lock joint on her left side. Pull on the loop, pinch, and then pull on the shuttle thread. And so what helps is if you've got a pen or a pencil nearby, you can kind of start forming it into that tube. And you can see that that button is going to be on the front side of the body and not hidden in between the rows like it would normally have been. Okay, so I will let you shuttle tatters move along. Let me go back to the needle tatters. Drop my needle. Okay, so we're ready to close this chain. And this is a long chain, so it may take some easing to get it closed, but I tend to pull my double stitches up nice and close to that needle, so I almost make it hard for myself when I'm closing. And yes, we could turn this into a ring, but I'm not going to let you do that. We're going to treat this like a chain, like the shuttle tatters had to do. So I pull it up, but not overly much, because I want it to stay fairly straight. If you know how to do the balanced double stitch, feel free to do that. I'm not a stickler for technique unless it really changes the look of the pattern. So here we are with our chain all closed, and we're going to come around here and do a down lock join here where the paper clip is. And what that's going to do, it's going to lock this chain into place. So there will be no tying of knots until the shoelace trick, until we are ready to tat her arms. And so to do the lock join, we're going to pull a loop of the needle thread down through this hole left by the paper clip. And then the needle will go down through that hole. Pull on the loop to make sure your chains are tightened where you want them. And then pull on your needle thread to lock it into place. We do not reverse the work. We do not tie a knot because that lock join is keeping everything in place. And so we're going to start our next trip around with 6 double stitches. And I want to pull those up right next to where we left off, where that lock join is. Okay, we've got 6 double stitches. Now we have to do a lock join. So what you do is you pull the needle through all those double stitches. We want these to line up just like if we were doing block tatting. So we're taking the leg part of the stitch and joining it to the waistband of the stitch. That's when we would do a lock join. And you can't do these with rings, otherwise you'd have trouble closing your rings. So again, we're going to do a down lock join because I'm tatting on the front side. And then the needle goes down through the loop. Pull on the loop to make sure that chain is right where I want it to be. And then pull on the needle thread to lock it into place. And that will stabilize that chain, so we do not have to tie a knot. We'll do 6 more double stitches to get to the front center. And once I have my 6 double stitches, we'll tighten up the ring or the chain, pull the needle through, and we're going to do another down lock join. Pulling a loop of the needle thread through that picot, down through the picot, and then the needle goes down through the loop. We pull on the loop to make sure that chain is right where we want it, and then pull on the needle thread to lock it into place. And now we're ready to add our front button. So again, we'll do the first half of the stitch. We'll bring the button up because I want to put that button on the waistband of the stitch. And then I'll do the second half of the stitch. And I want to leave enough thread. I don't want this, where I have the first half on one side, the bead taking up a big space, and the second half on the other side of the bead. I don't want that. I want to leave enough space on that waistband so that the first half can come up and touch the second half of the stitch. So you have to add a little ease in there for those beads. And again, we'll do 5 more double stitches. And then we'll pull the needle through. Bring it over and lock join it into place. We're doing down lock joins. Pull the needle thread down through the picot. Put the needle down through that loop of needle thread. Pull on that loop to tighten our chain right where I want it. Pinch and then tighten that needle thread. And again, you can, after you get a couple rounds, you can stick it on put it on your crochet hook or on a pencil or whatever to kind of start forming it into your tube type of shape. So I'm going to leave you all to tat. I'm not leaving you, I'll be right here. But I'm going to let you all tat nicely, and then I'll talk a little bit about the arms when somebody gets to the arms or when I get to the arms. And then we will go from there. Let me see if there's anything I didn't tell you. Talk about that. Okay, we're good. You can have some quiet tatting time. Are there any questions? Hello, Nanetta. I'm glad you like the pattern. Great. No questions? Everybody must be happily tatting away. Yes, Linda, and a good needle tatter can do any tatting pattern. Double stitch is a double stitch. So, if you can't master the shuttle, you have this other option. Well, thank you, Pam. Yeah, and about every 2 or 3 trips around, I'll stick my crochet hook in, or my pen or pencil in there, and kind of force it into a tube shape. So, lock join with the needle thread, yes. Yes, you pull the needle thread through the joining picot. And once you've worked all the way around, there's enough room where the lock join is that you can get your crochet hook in there and actually do another join without having to leave a very small picot. I don't need that just yet. I learned to shuttle tat in 1992, and then I took a needle tatting class with my mom, and so we both learned to needle tat at the same time. And I went back to doing my shuttle tatting, but Mom stuck with her needle tatting. So whenever I learned a technique and I told my mom, I don't know if you can do this with a needle, the next time I'd see her, she would have done it. So I'm convinced you can do most any technique with a needle. There's just some little finessing you have to do when you do that, but I mean, she even did a dimpled ring with her needle. I don't know how she did that, unless she had to have taken it off the needle and then did her join and come back in. So there's ways around it, ways around to get your needle to do what you want it to do. Yes, Nanette, and you could probably use all those thread ends to make her hair. I never thought of that. Exactly, Jillian. You could do little baubles and for the heads. Now remember, as you're tatting, you don't want to make your chains uh, longer with each trip because you don't want them sitting outside each other. You want them sitting on top of each other. So make sure you get them pulled up. We don't want to end up with a flat body. Oh, you're welcome, Laurel. Sorry to miss you. Sorry you have to leave early. I will be covering how to construct it, so you can catch that later on the video. gosh, great. Now I did leave 2 rows of tatting between each of the bead rows. And again, we do the first half of the stitch. We bring up the bead to right on the waistband of the stitch, and then we do the second half of the stitch. You want to leave enough ease in there so that the first half of the stitch will touch the second half of the stitch. And then we'll follow up with 5 more stitches. And then join into her side. So I'm going to start the about 3 rows that I'm missing here, but I'm going to start the arms. So up at the top of the pattern, we start, there. We start closing her in a little bit and forming shoulders. And so I start going down on my stitch count. So that row that we add the bead on up at the top is 6, lock join, 6, lock join, 6, lock join, 6, lock join. Then we'll start decreasing. So the next row will be 5, lock join, and that's where the arms take off. And so to do that, let me do 5 here. I do 5 double stitches. I lock join at the side. This is down lock join. And needle tatters, so far you have never tied a knot because you're relying on those lock joins to keep your chains stabilized. And that's what they will do that. They will stay stabilized as long as you have a lock join in there. But to get the curvature of the arm to indicate an elbow, I had to change the direction. And to do that, what you do is a shoelace trick. And basically a shoelace trick is tying the knot, tying that first knot like you do when you're tying your shoes. So we tie a knot, and needle tatters, at this point, once you've done your 5 double stitches and lock joined, yes, you may tie a knot, because we want to turn the direction of the chain so that her elbows won't go forwards. We want them to go backwards like a normal elbow. And so I want to make sure as I'm tying this that both arms of this knot are bending. I do not want something like this where one thread is looped around the other. You won't get that reverse work or that change of direction that you want. You want both of them to be bent. Basically, when I'm teaching it, I say you want both sides of that knot to be breaking so that you actually change directions. And then on the other ladies, we did pearl tatting, but on the itty bitty Belle, I thought that would be too much. So I just relied on a normal chain, and it's 40 double stitches. And I know that's a lot to pull your needle through, needle tatters, but it gives her a nice length of arm and hand. And that's 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. Let me get a little bit tatted in here. And so once you get it curved and her arm goes down, you can see that the arm is actually curving towards the front of the body, which is what we wanted. And we wouldn't not have gotten that if we didn't do that shoelace trick. And so you would go ahead and tat the whole 40 double stitches to get to the other side. And then you'd lock stitch into the other side. Let me bring up this pattern again. You would lock stitch on the other side of her and then do your 5 double stitches to get you to the center back. Then we do a trip of 4 all the way around, and then we do a trip of, well, not all the way, we do 4 and 5. And then the last one is 3, 4, 4, 3. It doesn't bring it up to a complete close, but it brings it up enough that you won't see the head is going to come down and cover that area here that's open. So you won't have to worry about losing your stuffing or anything. So are there any questions on the arms? Once you get over here to the other side, you will do another shoelace trick, and then you'll lock join on the other side too. We have to do a shoelace trick to put our ball and shuttle or ball and needle threads back to the original position so that we can finish up the body. So I will give you a few minutes there, and then I'll cover construction. Yes, Jillian, I believe it will be. You can catch it on the YouTube. Get on the online tatting class YouTube channel, and you can pick it up from there. So it should be available later. Question for the arms. Have you also put thin wire along with core thread to move them where you like? No, I really haven't had to. However, that is an option. When I did the gentleman, his arms were basically bobble tatted with 2 shuttles. So basically you're doing one ring and then with one shuttle, and then you do another ring with the other shuttle. But then I had to put the core thread for his hands through there. But wire probably would have helped because his arms tend to have a mind of their own. I did, one of my prototypes had a hat that actually forced his arm down holding his hat. So, but this one wants to go around anybody he can get his arm around. So, but that would be great. These bigger ones I did pearl tatting, and to make them a little more round, you can actually load up the core with some extra threads, and I've done that before. So wire could be an interesting option. This is true, yes. Yes, jelly and tatting on flip stitches. Use the paper clip and kind of work back from the paper clip. That would be an option too. So, okay, if I could have everyone's attention, I'm going to talk a bit, cover how she goes together. And so I'm going to start with about 18 inches of thread. Regular sewing thread is fine. This is a little heavier. Basically, I used it so you could see it on the computer. And then we're going to put a small knot in the end. I like to use a quilter's knot. Number one, it's easier to teach. The ends of the arm, actually, they go from one shoulder to the other as one chain. And then I'll put something in her hands to kind of hide the fact that she has no hands. So I can take them and kind of pinch it. And then when I'm attaching, a flower or a heart or something to the hands, that's all covering up her hands because she doesn't really have any hands. So to finish this little girl, I do a knot, and I can clip that off a little closer, knot on the end of the thread, and then we want to fold the ribbon in half. And I'm going to start a little bit away from the end and just do a little running stitch seam to tack the back seam together. Yeah, on the gentleman has 2 separate arms, but the girls, they just have one. And so I just do a running stitch to put a seam in the back of her skirt. Now this will be matched up to the back of her body. Take a little stitch here at the end to tie it off. And then I'm going to do a running stitch around the top edge of her skirt. And that's going to put the gathers into it. And you don't want to make them super long or super short. If you do them super short, then it's hard to get the skirt gathered up. So these are probably about 1/8 of an inch apart, 1/8 of an inch long. Two to 3 millimeters. There are patterns. I have to find them. Right now, my big computer is being worked on, and that's where the patterns are. So I'm hoping I can either find a printed version or I get my computer back soon. And so that way I have written the patterns. Let me put it that way. Okay, and then I'm gonna turn this skirt inside out, or outside in. So now I have the good side on the outside. And then when I pull on my running stitch, that gathers the skirt up. And then I'll knot things off here. Now, once you're done with tatting the body, you can hide those threads inside the body. So that's a nice plus on these little people. Okay. So there's that. And normally I would use black thread, but I wanted you to be able to see it. And then I got a button. And then for her body, I do like to stuff it a little bit. And the easiest thing, I always have cotton balls on hand, and I don't always have stuffing on hand. So they don't take a lot, so you can usually use a bit of a cotton ball to get her stuffed. And I don't stuff her, I don't overstuff, but she's firm. I'm going to have to get a needle up through there too, so. Okay. So we've got her body stuff. We have her skirt gathered. And again, I'll either use a bit of tatting thread or I'll use my sewing thread. And for a sewing thread, I probably would double it in the needle. But we're going to go up through the button. Now the button kind of holds things together. It also helps hold the stuffing into the body. So then I go up through the gathers of her skirt. Up through her body. Whoops. And I do want to keep a thread tail out down here at the bottom. And then I will go up through the head bead. I'll go around the head bead and back down through the body. Down through the skirt. And then down through the other side of the button. And then I tie this in a double knot. Down here at the button. And if I want to, I can actually pull those thread ends down through her skirt as well, and then just clip everything in underneath her skirt. So there's really, hiding the thread ends is really simple. And then I'd clip all these thread tails off. You know, you can leave a little bit of thread tail there. You don't want to cut it off right next to your knot. And so there she is. And because I have this thread going around the head, that's why I put the hat on. And the hat is tatted here. And there is a graph for it. It shows that it looks similar to a Catherine wheel, but it's not. It has to cup. So again, as you're doing these chains around the outside edge, because we have 2 chains of 3, by the time you get to the second chain of 3, the whole thing is going to start cupping, and that's what you want. So, you know, pull those chains up as tight, well, you know, as tight as you normally would, and that way the hat will form. So there is a technique for doing the hat as well. We do start with a ring, and needle tatters, you will not tie your knot at the lock joints, but yes, you will tie the knot at the end of the chains because you have to reverse the work, and at the end of the rings that are out here on the outside edge of the brim. So you'd start with a ring in the center, and then needle tatters would tie their knot to reverse the work. Shuttle tatters would just reverse the work. And so as we're tatting around this outside edge, you're going to be, you know, as you're chaining around the outside edge, you're going to be wanting to do a reverse double stitch because you'll be tatting on the back side. So as you do your lock joins, because we'll have the back side facing us, then you can do your up lock joins like you normally do, which would, opposite side would be a down join. So, and then we get out here, we chain, and this is just chains and rings with long picots that join from ring to ring. And that was just a design element. So to get the hat to fit on her head, again, I'll either use the same tatting thread, that's usually what I do anyway, but I can't find my ball of pink thread. I put it away. Very, very, very well, I put it away. And so I'm going to use my heavy sewing thread. I go in to about this chain that's number 5, that's the 5 count. And I bring the needle up in the center. So it's the 5 count ring and the needle's up in the center. And I loop over that 5 count chain and put the needle back down through the hat. So each of these threads will go down through her head, and then up through the small ring. And then the other thread tail. Will again go down through her head. And up through the small ring on the other side. So as we pull on those, we actually have the threads from her bonnet. And if you're using your matching tatting thread, you don't have to hide those ends, because we'll finish her up with a pretty little bow on the side. And then, of course, I'll tighten that bow up so it's itty bitty Belle size. And then I'll clip them off. And so she's all constructed, with the exception of her pretty flower that goes in her hands. So let me talk to you a little bit about these multicolored threads. There are hand-dyed threads, and there are space-dyed threads. And the difference between the two is space-dyed, they've taken the thread and they've laid it out, and they put pink here, for example, and then a darker pink, and then a light green, and then a darker green. So if you have space-dyed threads, the thread color changes evenly. And to check that, you cut the threads at the same location in the color repeat, and the color repeats evenly, no matter which strand you're using. It's the same all the way down. So if you're tatting with one of these multicolored threads and your motif calls for, and your doily calls for so many motifs that are repeated. You want to start at the same point with each, same color change point with each motif. And I'd say that with experience because I did a pattern of a peacock, and I did not do that. I started to, but then I didn't cut out the ones that I didn't do it on. So I had half of my eyes, peacock eyes, were matching and half were not. And so it did not judge very well. But if you start, like say, I'm going to do a motif and I want to start right here where the pink and the green change. Do that with each motif and they will all turn out pretty much the same. At least in judging, they will look pretty much the same. There might be some variation having to do with the tension of your tatting, but for the most part, they will all match and your piece will judge a lot better. Now with hand-dyed threads, that probably wouldn't work real well. You just have to take your hand-dyed threads and see if you have that regular repeat from strand to strand. And so this is, I've picked these off of this ball, and I just cut them where the dark green meets the pink. And each one is going to repeat in the same manner. So it's going to repeat the dark green in the same spot, like Georgette does. And the pink is going to come into play at the same spot and change to the light pink, pretty close to the same spot as well. So these we know are space dyed. They've laid them out, they've dyed specific lengths, and you're not going to get too much variation. With a hand dyed, if you're working on a doily with motifs, it probably is not the best thing for a hand dyed thread because you won't have that regular color change on your hand dyes. It would do better on one that's worked round and round and round and grows outside without the repeat thing of motifs within the doily. So when I'm tatting my flowers, I want green for my stem and pink for my flower. So I'm going to start my flower up here where the pink is. And so I have automatic pink and automatic stem. And so that is a fun way to get your little tatted flowers done easily without having to change colors in the middle of things. And you really don't have any ends to worry about. You can hide the one inside your ring possibly, but you know they're gonna behave themselves. So we're just talking a little flower motif, and then that gets sewn in her hands. So that's it. Any questions? Hope you had fun with this pattern. Hope you have fun with this pattern. And are there any questions? Either with tatting or with the construction.